Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. Good morning. It's really great to see you all here. I hope you're enjoying my home province of Nova Scotia, where I was born. Canada, the Canadian government has been for many years focused on reducing internal barriers to trade and reducing red tape. In fact, Minister LeBlanc has already removed federal exclusions from the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, and that has elevated our standing to second under some organizations' mechanisms for grading these types of things. At the same time, we know that there is more work to do. Donc, je voudrais discuter trois points aujourd'hui là-dessus. First, I am immediately striking a working group on productivity. We know that Canada has strong economic markers. A AAA credit rating, the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, historically low unemployment. At the same time, we know that there is more work to do on GDP per capita or productivity. And so I will be launching a working group to study productivity in the public and private sectors. And this will happen very soon, within the next few weeks. Secondly, Minister LeBlanc and I will together meet with the First Ministers at the Council for Internal Trade next month to address interprovincial barriers to trade and reducing red tape. This is a fundamental issue that I have heard from businesses across the country about, that they need to be able to transact with other stakeholders within this country without barriers to trade. The federal government has the constitutional jurisdiction over trade and commerce, and so we will be at the table for that conversation. And then thirdly, barriers to trade exist not only within our own country, but of course cross-border. And I've been working under the aegis of the Regulatory Cooperation Council, that's a federal body under the Treasury Board Secretariat, to reduce cross-border areas of irritants in the trade relationship. I've already been to Washington once in June, where my counterpart, Shalanda Young, and I agreed to work together over the summer. I will be traveling to DC next week to conclude this round of negotiations under the Regulatory Cooperation Council. We will be isolating 3 priority areas for cross-border work to reduce barriers to trade for Canadian and U.S. businesses, and I will update you once we've had that meeting on what those 3 priority areas are. Donc, nous avons beaucoup de travail à faire, mais il y a un temps où nous pouvons le faire. Je vais travailler avec mes parties prenantes dans 7 pays et aussi dans les États-Unis, et je voudrais répondre à vos questions maintenant.
Hi, it's Aaron Beswick from the Chronicle Herald. Productivity has been declining for about a decade, and Canadian, a per capita GDP is now closer to Alabama than it is close to California, which works out, I think, as compared between a Canadian, about $20,000 less per Canadian compared to American. Do you think striking a working group at this point is enough?
Well, I appreciate the question. Certainly love to see the Chronicle Herald represented here. I will say that this is not the first time we are examining this issue. Not at all. Over successive budgets, you have seen the federal government invest in businesses, invest in AI. Take Budget 2024, for example, where we put $2 billion on the table for artificial intelligence, and in particular for sandboxes and startups. That is one way in which we are seeking to address the issue of productivity. to ensure that businesses can become more efficient. In addition, you have seen our government focus on regulations and the regulatory environment to remove barriers to trade so that small businesses and large businesses can utilize revenue for growing their businesses and for hiring more employees. So in terms of that work, Bill S6 is in its third reading in the House of Commons, and you'll see more activity on that bill, which seeks to reduce red tape. So my bottom line to you is that there's already been much work done in this area, but the fact remains that despite very strong economic indicators on the one hand, we do have more work to do to examine the causes of low productivity levels, as well as how we can further grow the pie for this country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Minister Anand, Ashley Burke, CBC News. What's a specific example of one of the irritants that you're hearing when it comes to the cross-border issues that you think this work could potentially change?
Do you mean Canada-US?
Canada-US.
So, love the question, because we've had many roundtables across this country, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Windsor, Moncton, Ottawa, where we've been meeting with small businesses and stakeholders, not-for-profits, to find out how we can make it more efficient to do business on both sides of the border. The one area that we have really heard a lot of feedback on is the border, making sure that our borders are operating seamlessly. One precise example that I have heard is the need to file paper-based manifests at the border for truckers, whereas they can file virtual manifests with the federal government in terms of their regulatory compliance. And so we want to reduce those irritants in the relationship so that supply can move more quickly across the border. That's the type of thing that I'm working on with my counterpart in the United States. Some of the issues that came up at the roundtables are issues that we can work on within the federal government without the cooperation of the United States, and so to that extent, I've already been in touch with my federal colleagues, the other ministers responsible, to make sure that they are aware of the issues within their own portfolios.
What could the implications be for Canada of a Harris versus Trump presidency?
We are undertaking this work because we know that it's important to maintain a very strong trading relationship between Canada and the United States, regardless of who is in the White House. And at this point, we have to focus on the fact that $3.3 billion of trade in goods and services pass through the border every single day. I was leading the push to ensure that we were able to reach an agreement with the CBSA in June, which we were able to do. Their work is excellent, and we need to make sure that we have a border that flows seamlessly so that that $3.3 billion of goods and services can continue to flow, and that billions of dollars can be returned to Canadians with the reduction of barriers to trade.
Good morning, Minister. JP Tasker from CBC News. You mentioned GDP per capita. Some experts say it's drifting lower because of the high levels of immigration to this country. The Prime Minister yesterday suggested the government will be reviewing the number of permanent residents that are coming in each year. Do you personally support keeping the immigration levels, the permanent resident levels in particular, at 500,000 for next year and the year after, given what we're dealing with GDP per capita, but also elevated levels of unemployment among immigrants?
Let's take a step back and recognize that Canada's economy has grown significantly over decades and decades because of immigration. I myself am a child of immigrant parents who came to Nova Scotia in the 1960s, and they are an example, my parents, of thousands and thousands of other families who have come to Canada to contribute to our economy and the growth of our economy. So immigration writ large has been important for the economic growth of this incredible country. At the same time, we do see the need to examine our immigration policy to ensure that we have the levels of immigrants where they need to be, and specific aspects of our immigration program also where they need to be. And in particular, you've seen us focus on temporary foreign workers over the past few days and months. You've also seen us focus on the students, international students, and Minister Miller, I know, is examining both the issue of students and immigration writ large, and he'll have more to say in the coming weeks.
Given how dialed in you are about the economy, you've got your eye on it, though. Do you think it's appropriate to welcome 500,000 more permanent residents next year, given where things are at?
I know that this is under very close examination by Minister Miller and his team. I, in fact, spoke with him yesterday about these issues, knowing that I was going to be striking this working group on productivity. I want to stress that the working group is looking at macro level issues, macroeconomic issues, in order for businesses and organizations to be able to function more efficiently, to utilize their revenue, to grow their businesses, and so that we are able to see the growth of the pie across the country.
Bonjour, madame. J'aimerais vous entendre sur les Forces armées canadiennes. C'est-à-dire que dans les coupures que vous avez faites dans les ministères, les Forces armées canadiennes disent que ça nous nuit en termes d'équipement. Dans le cadre des relations avec les États-Unis, est-ce que vous ne craignez pas dans vos discussions de vous faire reprocher ces coupures au sein de l'armée alors qu'eux pressent le Canada à atteindre le fameux 2 %?
Premièrement, je voudrais dire que nous continuons d'augmenter nos dépenses militaires. Par exemple, dans le budget 2024, nous avons vu une nouvelle stratégie où nous continuons de bâtir une force très large, mais aussi avec l'équipement nécessaire. Cette stratégie va avoir des avantages pour nos forces armées canadiennes. En même temps, oui, nous avons vu une relation très proche avec les États-Unis et nous avons dit déjà que nous pouvons confirmer ou we can reach le 2 % avant 2031. Donc, ça, c'est très important pour nos forces armées canadiennes. Vous avez mentionné l'équipement nécessaire. Oui, c'est une priorité. C'était la priorité pour moi quand j'étais là comme la ministre de la Défense nationale. Et nous continuons de bâtir les forces armées canadiennes. Et je voudrais mentionner aussi que l'opposition a décidé de voter contre ces mesures dans le budget 2024 et aussi dans les supplementary estimates. Donc, je voudrais demander à eux, quelle est votre politique pour les forces armées canadiennes? Pourquoi est-ce que vous votez contre nos forces armées canadiennes chaque fois que nous voulons bâtir et donner et confirmer les investissements nécessaires dans nos forces armées canadiennes?
Est-ce que vous pouvez élaborer à tout le monde un petit peu, vous dites il y a 3 priorités sur lesquelles je vais travailler avec mes homologues américains. Quelles sont ces priorités? Au moins nous donner une idée, là.
Mais ce n'est pas prudent pour moi de discuter ces priorités maintenant ici parce que je dois avoir cette conversation avec mon homologue la semaine prochaine. Mais je voudrais mentionner 2 choses. Premièrement, nous avons le même objectif d'avoir une réduction dans le fardeau administratif pour les petites entreprises. Deuxièmement, nous avons déjà livré une annonce pendant le mois de juin où nous avons mentionné l'importance de l'économie et les secteurs de notre économie. Donc, nous avons ajouté quelques détails la semaine prochaine et je voudrais parler avec vous quand nous avons le faire. I can take one more. Whatever.
Okay, great. Kate McKenna, CBC News. I'm wondering if you can give us a few more details about what this working group's going to look like, who's going to be on it, what kinds of things will you discuss, how often are you going to meet, what's the goal, like what is the tangible goal of it? Could you elaborate?
So, for sure, we are going to be looking at productivity in both the public and the private sectors. That's extremely important. We have 300,000 employees or so in the public sector, and we want to make sure that we're addressing concerns there. We will be working with unions to do that and engaging with them. At the same time, we know that GDP per capita is also an issue in the private sector, and so I want to make sure that we have a working group that is able to examine both public and private sectors in terms of expertise. I want to make sure that we are working with alacrity, and I want to make sure that we have representation from all parts of the country. Those are the types of parameters that I'll be working with. One more.
Mylène Crête de la presse. L'ambassadeur chinois a déjà réagi là, par rapport aux tarifs qui seront imposés sur les véhicules électriques en disant qu'il y aura des représailles au Canada. Est-ce que ça vous inquiète que d'autres secteurs de l'économie écopent, comme par exemple l'agriculture?
Premièrement, les véhicules électriques, c'est un secteur de notre économie très important et nous avons vu que nous avons fait beaucoup d'investissements dans ce secteur. C'est important quand nous voulons avoir un pays et un monde où on peut reconnaître que les changements climatiques est une réalité. Donc, tout le monde dans notre pays doit avoir l'opportunité pour bâtir ce pays et donc nous voulons répondre comme d'autres pays avec ces mesures comme ça.
Mais quitte à ce que d'autres secteurs de l'économie payent le prix?
À ce moment, nous n'avons pas d'autres choses à dire sur ça, mais bien sûr, nous continuons d'examiner tous les secteurs de notre économie pour déterminer où nous pouvons accomplir des avantages économiques pour notre pays.
Great with Global. After Toronto, St. Paul's losing that by-election, how concerned are you about your seat? And when you talk with your colleagues from Toronto and folks in Toronto, why do you think the Liberals were not able to connect with voters in a safe Liberal seat?
Well, Mackenzie, I appreciate the question. Let me tell you, I was out knocking on doors in Oakville, Ontario this weekend, just before getting on a flight to come here. And I will say that voters in Oakville, Ontario actually care about climate change and they believe that it exists. Voters in Oakville, Ontario also like to see support for our senior citizens in the form of dental care and pharmacare and support those measures. And voters in Oakville, Ontario are favorable about our investments in health care and the green economy writ large. So I would like to put on the table that we have a lot of work to do across the country in every riding, but I'm looking forward to fighting hard for Oakville. Thank you very much.